I ran down the street as fast as my legs could carry me, still clutching Taehyung's credit card in my hand. I thought I saw a grocery store when we got out of the cab earlier, and luckily, I was right. It's where I needed to go. I ran faster. I didn't look back to see if Taehyung was following. I had no doubt that he would catch up with me. In fact, I expected him to catch up. I had given up on staying away. But first, I had to get to that supermarket. I wanted to see where you were going. Weren't you afraid I'd run away and spend all your money on you, money? I said, waving the credit card in his face. Zenotation spot what's mine is yours. You'll never crave anything, ever again. You can spend as much of my money as you like. I stared at him for a moment. I never had enough money to spend on anything other than what was strictly necessary. Sometimes I didn't even have enough to buy food. I lost count of how many times I went to bed hungry after my dad got sick. Back home, I was just starting to be able to support myself. I rented a small one-room apartment and was paying for it with a lousy waitressing job. It wasn't the most luxurious life, but it was enough for me. And I was very proud of the fact that I was doing all of this alone, supporting myself. Of course, sometimes I didn't have enough money to buy groceries. But maybe now that I no longer had to save my entire paycheck for a plane ticket to Paris, I could finally start living instead of just surviving. Of course, that was before I missed my flight home and failed to show up for several shifts I was scheduled for. Shifts I needed to pay my rent, which was already due. I didn't even want to think about how I was going to pay for another flight home. I figured maybe I wouldn't get groceries for a while yet. I remembered that I had peanut butter in the cupboard and I could always steal some chips off people's plates in the cafeteria if I still had a job. Hopefully my boss would understand. That would have to be enough for now. When I didn't respond, Taehyung squeezed my sides. Why did you come here anyway? I smiled. If you need your sour grape juice, this is the only place I'll let you get it. He raised an eyebrow, looking amused. And even? I agreed. Zenotation spot yes. And I have to choose. I cut him off, crushing my lips against his. Taehyung let out a grunt of surprise, but didn't protest. A low growl came from deep in his chest, and he immediately deepened the KSS, pulling my body against his. Knowing how quickly things could get worse when it came to kissing Taehyung, I pulled my lips away from his when I felt him run his tongue across the opening of my lips, asking for entrance. He groaned in disapproval and tried to KSS me again, but I placed my hand over her mouth as a barrier. He growled. Give me what I want and I'll KSS you again, I said. He narrowed his eyes and I slowly removed my hand. You're lucky to be my mate, he said in a low voice that said his wolf was close to the surface. If someone else tried to manipulate me like that, I would put them on back in their places in seconds in the most painful way possible. I swallowed hard. He leaned in so his lips were almost brushing mine. It's a good thing I'd do anything to have your sweet lips on my mind, he whispered. I could feel my cheeks heating up. Taehyung laughed softly. Come on, let's get your wine. He pushed me toward one of the hallways. After choosing a reasonably priced bottle of wine for about €6, I glanced at Taehyung. Okay, we have the wine. Taehyung had an arm wrapped possessively around my waist, his thumb rubbing my flank. Now let's get the bread. He pushed me over to where the bread was located. Zenotation spot bread? Why do we need it? What are you up to? I asked. I was really surprised when you came here. This place was our next stop. Zenotation spot same? Why? Taehyung, Zenotation spot let's buy French bread and cheese. Wine, bread and cheese. Shall we have a picnic? I asked. I looked out. The sun is almost, guess you'll just have to wait and see. After purchasing our wine, bread, and 5 different types of cheese, Taehyung and I hopped into a taxi and headed to our next destination. which by chance was the Eiffel Tower. When I stepped out of the cabin, I couldn't help but gape at the massive cast iron structure. It was much bigger than I had imagined. Wow, I said. This is my second time in Paris and I just now managed to see the Eiffel Tower. Taehyung came up behind me and wrapped his arms around me, leaning down to place his chin on my shoulder. I'm happy to be here with you for the first time you can see the tower, he said. He kissed my cheek softly and then held my hand. Zenotation spot, let's go. He led me towards a bench. There were already people seated when we approached, but when they saw Taehyung, they immediately got up and ran away, muttering, "Sorry, Alpha." Why don't we sit on that bench? I asked, pointing to an empty bench. It had to be this bench, Taehyung said sharply as we sat down. Mr. Bossy, as usual. I was finally starting to Taehyung, but maybe that was because I knew the end was near. Soon I would go back to work and try to forget all about my trip to Paris. I shook my head to get rid of that thought, returning to the present. The sun was starting to set, painting the sky in beautiful shades of pinks, purples, and oranges. There were people sitting around us, looking up at the tower. I noticed that several other people were also arriving, arranging blankets on the grass and sitting on benches around. Why are there so many people? I asked as I looked around. You'll see, Taehyung said. I raised an eyebrow but didn't say anything. He opened the paper bag that contained wine, bread, and cheese and took them all out. I tried to grab the bread, but he took it out of my reach. I fixed him with a questioning look. He looked at the clock, just a few more seconds. And then our night became truly magical. He nodded as he watched me, giving me a smile that took my breath away. When I was a kid, my mom and I used to come here every year after the Alpha conference and watch the lights come on. She would take me to that store we went to and buy the most expensive bottle of wine they had. I didn't even know this strong, possessive alpha male had a vulnerable side. I was thrilled knowing that Taehyung was willing to sharing that side with me, made me like him even more. Zenotation spot what? He asked suddenly. It snapped me out of my daze of wonder. Zenotation spot what? You were looking at me. Not that I minded. I would like to know what you were thinking. I blushed. She couldn't let him know that she was thinking about how much she cared about him. Nothing, I said quickly. I was just imagining what a beautiful scene it must have been, you and your mother sitting under the stars in Paris. He nodded and looked at the tower solemnly. Yes. She's not coming with you to Paris anymore? His eyes gleamed and he was quiet for a moment. Zenotation spot no. She and my father died almost 5 years ago. Oh, Taehyung, I'm so sorry. I put my hand on his shoulder. I can see how much they meant to you. He took a deep breath and then turned his head to place a kiss on my hand. Zenotation spot it was a long time. There is no need to dwell on the past. He bent down to serve our food and wine. I try to do this every year to honor her memory. He opened the wine and held the bottle out. I smiled. Zenotation spot I am honored. We spent the next few hours talking and drinking our bottle of cheap wine. Soon all the people around us were gone, just Taehyung and I stood there, looking at the city lights ahead of us. The Eiffel Tower lights went out for the night, but Taehyung and I continued talking about anything and everything. Talking to him was so easy. We spent the whole night like that, and the moment the sun rose no horizon, I was completely delighted with Taehyung. I was lying on the bench with my head in his lap as he played with my hair when he finally said, "Do you want to get some coffee? I know a great place down the street." I smiled and shook my head. Once in the cafe, Taehyung told me to find a seat while he placed our order, but I quickly grabbed his hand, pulling him back to me. Taehyung shot me a questioning look. "Don't leave me," I said quickly, afraid of the pain I might feel if I didn't have contact with him again. I didn't think I could handle it. My eyebrows rose in surprise. Zenotation spot, he is sure? I asked nervously. Taehyung leaned over and kissed my forehead. Zenotation spot, I am sure. And if you feel any kind of pain, all you have to do is come close to me and touch me, and it will all go away. I gripped his hand tighter. I didn't want to be away from him, not even a little bit. I think I'd feel better if I went with you. Taehyung didn't protest. Instead, his face split into a breathtaking smile. He wrapped me in his arms and pulled me to him, nestling his face in my hair and breathing deeply. After eating our coffees and croissants, Taehyung and I wandered the streets of Paris, talking and watching the city wake up. I was beginning to understand why Paris was considered such a romantic city. I felt awkward sitting there in my jeans and sweater, but the food was worth any discomfort I might have had. Oh my god, that was amazing, I said when I finished. I grabbed the check, ready to pay any price since Taehyung had paid for our food last night and our coffee this morning, but he snatched it away before I could touch it. No, he said firmly. I rolled my eyes. Taehyung, please let me pay for this. You've already spent too much. I'll feel terrible if you don't at least let me buy you lunch. He was already reaching into his pocket for his wallet. Zenotation spot, no way. As long as you're with me, you never will pay for nothing. In fact, I'll make sure you never have to pay for anything again. I scoffed. No way would I let that happen. At least let me pay for my food, how about that? It will make me feel better and not like I'm taking advantage of you, stealing all your money. You can argue as much as you like, this will not happen. He placed his card along with the bill and held it up to the waiter. To see. But before he closed the folder, I glimpsed the price of the meal. My eyes widened. Maybe it was better if I didn't pay. My meal alone would have cost me several hours at the cafeteria. Where do you get all that money, anyway? I asked. Then I realized what I had just said. Oh, sorry, was that a rude question? Zenotation spot, no, it was not. My family owns a large hunting company with thousands of workers who keep my pack afloat and then some. We provide live and dead animals for anyone who wants to buy them. At that moment our waiter appeared. He approached our table when he saw Taehyung waving. Please take this away before my date tries to pay again, Taehyung said in an amused tone, handing the man the folder. I looked at him. When the waiter left, I asked, so you kill animals? Taehyung chuckled and took my hand across the table. Don't look so scared, beautiful. It is the circle of life. And I have to provide for my pack somehow. Besides, what else would you expect from a pack of werewolves? We already hunted in our wolf forms to keep them sane. We might as well make some money out of it. I still didn't like the idea, but I decided not to discuss it. Once Taehyung had officially paid for our meal, we got up and left the restaurant, continuing our exploration of Paris.